to admit of our entire group, and I think you might know Kim.
Oh, I do.
Uh, she's really polite. She doesn't embarrass us, but she is the brightest shark of all. So, Kim, uh, I'm not sure how well you know Al and what he's doing, but Al, Kim's doing things. Kim, I passed on your email yesterday to all the girls hockey administration who have passed it on to all the coaches yesterday. But you're doing great work. So go ahead, Kim, introduce yourself, and Al
Well,
will get back on his topics again. Go ahead, Kim.
she doesn't have to introduce herself. We know each other, and I admire Kim for what she's doing. And she took the bull by the horns and went and did what she thought was right. And she's been very, very successful in what she's doing. And you know, talking to Kim, you can't help but learn. How are you doing, Kim?
I'm doing great, Alan. How are you?
Every day is a gift, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to chat. Yeah, it's always I don't want to take up any airtime, Wally, because I want to listen to Alan. I think there's I always want to grow and get bigger, and I think a lot of what he does is maybe a direction that my business or my company could go in the future in terms of expanding. But thanks for passing on that email, Wally. I had Sam told me she passed it all to all the Calgary coaches. I sent out an email yesterday about how to score more goals in girls hockey, which I think I sent it out to about 5,000 people, and I think it got opened about 3,000 times already. So it's a pretty popular topic in girls hockey. But always happy to share, always happy to learn. Yeah, I won't take up any more of the precious airtime we get here with Alan.
Well, my son went to the Välimäki Institute in Finland, and he did his thesis in goal scoring. And at the time, it was a bit of a breakthrough and a lot of repetition now when other people are doing the same thing. But it's a very important, and there's a lot of things involved there. And believe it or not, stick length is one of them. And because if your stick is too long, then you're not able to, you know, you're not to operate in small spaces, and everything is small spaces right now because there's no room. Everything's so fast, and puck has to move so fast. But anyway, those are things. I guess that's a topic we could talk about later. But the Hall of Famers all have a shorter stick than the ones that aren't, and of course some are longer because their arms are shorter. But it's all alignment is so important in skating. But anyway, those. I don't know if I can get you a copy of that or not, Kim. I don't know if it's still in circulation. That was quite a few years ago. Uh, but anyway, it's a great topic because it's harder to score now, but the good ones are finding a way to do it, and so there's always something new to learn. And uh, anyway, I'm not sure where I should go from here, Wally.
Well, the leadership stuff is goes. We could go forever on the leadership stuff, but Kim, with you on the technical stuff is really intriguing, and you did some things on shooting. I grew up in the day out of shooting where it was load up, back foot, transfer weight, power shooting, and accuracy was determined by pointing the blade. And now it's shooting off the front foot and quick release. And that's something we're teaching young people now. And watching Tom's U13 skaters, Cassie has done that with them, and they are doing. And this is U13, no dust shooting, no dust passing. Their pass ratio is probably 4-1 in terms of the opposition completed. So the skill level that's happening at that age, and it's amazing. But that's your area, Al.
Well,
And
I'd like to. I think I can get to that, but there's a way that, like I had, uh, the brain has to be trained. Like the brain has to be trained through proper repetition because in the game, you don't have time to think about what you're going to do with the puck, and it has to be automatic because the game is so fast. You can't say who's open and all that kind of stuff. You got to move quick, and so training the brain is so important. And I had a line mate when I played at UNB, and his son, he's in Montreal now, he's a Maritime, but his son is Lucas Medill, who's the mental performance coach for Team Canada. And Herb and I were on, when the Canadian juniors were playing, they were, we were watching, of course, we were talking back and forth, and Connor Bedard was the topic. And so Lucas had a week with him in Halifax, or 10 days, whatever. And he called his father and said, don't worry about, we were kind of concerned about his weight and his strength and all that. He said, don't worry about Connor Bernard. He said, his arms and legs don't even look real. They're so muscled. And he said, I asked him, I said, Connor, how many pucks do you shoot a day? And he said, I don't count pucks, I count buckets. He said, hundreds, hundreds. And he didn't get his shot from playing video games. And that's the important thing. He's trained his brain that he can shoot so quick. And that's really relevant to goal scoring. I was on a advisory committee on fitness and amateur sport for the National Fitness and Sport for the the federal sport minister Otto Jelnik a few years ago. It was quite a few years ago now. And Sylvie Bernier was on that. And she was an Olympic high diver, and she would do 100 mental perfect dives in her mind sitting at the foot of the high dive board before she did one. And Sylvie Bernier, or Susan Natras, she's I think a skeet shooter, Olympic skeet shooter, and we had a boy that I worked with for a number of years. He could have been a pro, but he decided to go another direction. But when he was, I tell the kids, if you got to learn to pass the puck. And I say, where do you pass it? Do you pass, if you're shooting a duck, do you pass where he was, where he is, or where he's going? And they figured out, well, where he's going. So this father took his son skeet shooting, that was in our program for 3 or 4 years at this time, and he never had a gun in his hand before, and he hit 3 out of 4 of the first clay pigeons. And his father said the only thing he could figure out was because he was trained to pass the puck that way. And so when the brain gets trained, things happen automatically. And that is that relates totally to goal scoring. And so I think those are things that we have to include in our training programs and our practices. And the other thing, before I forget it, when you're running a practice, like so many times, Hockey Canada coaches and whatever, you go to a rink and you'll see 10 kids standing in line, and so they're getting 1/10 of the ice time they could get if everything was going well, and so they need to make maximum use of the ice time. And the other thing that kills the practice is a coach talking to them. So we have the kids know what they're doing before they go on the ice. They have drills that relate to, well, like we talked about, triangulation and rotation. All those drills are suited to where they are in their development, and also so if they need a break, and sometimes they don't get very many, but it should be short. And what I use it for is, I use it for philosophy, talking good things into their lives, like, the right, who to get around with, all anything that comes into my mind. Just a quick little talk on that, but not very long. And so they get maximum use of their ice time. And the other thing is, they need to know what they're doing and why they're doing it. And so then we move into, after we do that for so long, the kids take over the practice. They'll teach the drill, have somebody demonstrate it maybe in skating, because we always do like half-hour skating in every practice, but we try to get an hour and a half, because that seems to be what is the best way to use ice time. And they get the chance to teach. And so all of the things they do in the classroom, they get up and talk. They present to each other, and there's always positive reinforcement. And as a result, we're getting a lot of coaches that are graduates. Like Devin Pratt spent years with us. He's a Swift Current there, and he was with the National Under-18 program. I think they won gold. And he's a future. But we have kids coaching, or grads coaching in Europe, and universities and all over the place, and who spent years with us, and by learning and teaching themselves and taking part in their own development and self-educating themselves, and by watching the NHL, what they do right, what they don't do right. And what they don't do right a lot of the time is not know how to play a one-on-one, which makes Connor McDavid look really good, because when they cross over when he's close, they're in his rearview mirror. But they've got to learn proper turns, and that's part of our skating program, and not to cross over, to use backward striding for lateral movement, to open up when you turn, and so you can recover if there's a cutback and those kinds of things. So, no, I'm rambling there, but
it's happening. People will put their hands up with questions, and you take it away from there. We're getting her going. Peter, you're up.
Yeah, Al, my question was, you mentioned how when the kids get on the ice that they already know what they're doing, and then you talked about definition of terms in that. When do you give them more or less that assignment that, okay, figure out what triangle means or whatever that the term may be? When is that actually given to them to do?
novice, 7 and 8 year olds.
But what about, I guess what I'm getting at is that something where they're on the ice and you say at the end of a practice, hey, I want you all to figure out what triangle means and let me know tomorrow? Like when is it actually given to the kids if they're just always going on the ice?
Well, it could be in the classroom, because we always have classrooms, like, as much as possible, and it's an interactive classroom where coaches and kids take part in it, and they don't feel threatened because there's always a positive reinforcement from it. And they say something and it may be not totally correct. We say, well, thank you for that. Does anybody else have an idea?
And is that something that happens at your school that you do, or is that something that in terms of a youth program that's part of a daily practice kind of thing?
Well, it's in our youth program. In the summer, we used to have about 2,700 kids. It's one location. It's probably one of the largest location hockey schools in the world, and they come from Europe and a lot of Asians and those people. But I think this summer we're limited to 2,000, and it'll be sold out pretty soon. And so we usually have 75 staff in working that week, and most of them are graduates. So we have a consistent way of delivering the program, but we give that when they're novice, and kids are so smart now. They understand that they're not challenged in our school system. They're not challenged, and they love it. They love it, and they love the positive reinforcement. They love the fact that they're included. They feel part of it, and so we have, and we only have on PEI, we only have like 160 or 70,000 people. It's grown a little bit, but we've had from our spring program, which is about 25 or 6 years old, we've had 20 that either been drafted or played in the NHL. In the summer program, we've had over 50 now, I think, that have either played or developed or been drafted at the NHL. The drafted kids could have made it too, but they didn't have the dream. So.
Al, I'd like to interrupt you because Peter's question, yours is a perfect world. Your school, your programs, and your spring hockey teams are catalysts for doing things the right way. Dan out there in his minor hockey system, Kim running it in Leaside, Peter, you've got volunteer coaches who are going to coach these teams in leagues and have to play games. And the expertise is one thing, the time is another. That's the biggest challenge facing youth hockey coaches today. We have to educate them. I think that's the point. And Peter, I think coming up with ideas as mentors to give to coaches where they ask kids to read an article and send it to them and send it back to a coach. Tim, I think that's something you could do with your minor hockey team. But we have to help coaches out there that aren't in the program, and we have to learn from the program that Al's running in every way. The fundamental teaching, which is not as good as it could be, and the ethical side of thing, developing leadership, character, trust, and respect. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on that, well, because I've done not at all to the extent that Al's done it, and this is great. I've given like assignments to teams, tell me what leadership is, write me a paragraph of what leadership is, or who you think is a leader in your life. It could be a parent, it could be a sports hero, or whatever it might be. But why? So giving them those assignments away from the rink, because like you're saying, the issue you face with youth hockey is you've got kids overscheduled, practices at 6, the parents are getting them there at 10 of 6, they're throwing their stuff on, and they're just getting on the ice. And then after that, they're just getting out of the rink because mom or dad have to go pick up the other sibling at a music lesson. So giving them something to take home has been helpful. But I just love it. I just love Al's idea. I wish there was more of that here, because summer seemed to be taken up by organizations that have their own. If you're part of a AAA team, you do what they do all summer. You don't get the opportunity to do the kind of thing that Al is talking about. Like that traditional hockey school is kind of on the wane here.
Yeah, I think like I think I mentioned earlier, maybe it was just a Wally last night, but nobody can succeed on what they're doing or improve on what they're doing unless they have a personal development program, because what you're doing like improves basically with your own personal growth. It'll never outgrow your own personal growth. So I think it's important that you have your coaches read books like Dr. John Maxwell's Talent is Never Enough, and I've one here, Failing Forward. Kids have to know it's okay to fail, because failure is not final. It's only an event, and it's a stepping stone. Really, you can use it as a positive thing, but all those things have to be taught. But your coaches have to be educated, and it's hard for someone that's running a program to do that. And I don't know any answer for that unless you. In our case, we have like all of our many of our graduates are coaching, but they've had like 20 years with us, and listening to people like Bruce Beaton and Wally Kosak, Dr. Joan Vickers, reading their products and stuff. So
Al, here's my before we go to Kim, the solution is in coach education, which is controlled by the governing body. And I believe, Peter, whether it's Hockey USA or Hockey Canada, leadership / ethical coaching modules have to replace the technical ones, because the technical ones that are on now are great. They give you activity, small area games, and repetitions, like Al mentioned. And that's all the coaches are capable of delivering on. They aren't able to teach, and we wouldn't expect them to. So in the future, if the governing bodies build the ethical modules related to what Al's doing, part of being important, it's more important than the X's and O's. So, Kim, go ahead, and then Tom, I think, had his hand up later.
The new hospital, is that where it is?
Hi, guys. So I just had a couple ideas, Peter. Not necessarily, just thinking about small things that make a big difference. Like for coaches who, like you said, are hockey people, kind of running in and out. Alan, I'm coaching my 6-year-old on U9B, so it's our lowest level rep team. Everyone else on the team, it's 8. She's a little tall kid, so it works out. But it's really reinvigorated my love of coaching, because other than teaching them offside, there's not a lot of tactical stuff that we really have to focus on. But I've been using a couple different things with them that I thought would have only been suited for when I've coached higher levels. In terms of the passion, igniting the fire, keeping the fire, burning the fire. And with the girls at that age group, they're not watching a lot of hockey. So I completely agree, Wally. The mission statement, the values, that this is the way we do this. This is the Wildcat way of being and playing. That's like the easiest sell for an 8-year-old girl. You tell her once, she's like, yes, I'm doing it. Thank you. She'll tell her parents, this is how we do it. It's a very low hanging fruit. I can't speak to how that would be with a group of 8-year-old boys. So the mission and all of that is like, culture is instant because they've never been on a competitive hockey team. So they just love all of it. They're bought in. So I don't know what to show you first. Alan will like this. I think Al Ramsey gave me this idea. I think you guys have seen this, my magnetic board. Al has one of these. So I bring this in the room for every practice and every game.
Why this won't go on?
And so, I'll show them plays and how to move around, but they can come up and actually do it. So instead of having the marker and having to erase it, I find that's hard. This has really been pretty revolutionary for our team. And it'll just be in the corner of the room. There'll be 2 girls messing around, joking around. And I will say, hey, can you guys draw how to line up for a face-off? Or can you set it up for me? You make them race against each other. You do it with the reds, you do it with the whites, so you can do it faster. They're not watching NFL games usually. They're not watching the pro female games usually. So it's actually been really neat. There'll be times I'll come in the room and they're like throwing it at the board and like fighting each other with it. And then there's times they're actually doing the plays. But that's been a really fun thing. I made it. I don't sell them as people on Instagram asked me. They're not hard to make, but it has really worked extremely well with our youngest age groups. And I would venture to guess it would be just as effective with older age, that way. So that's one thing that you don't even, as a coach, you don't even necessarily have to do anything. You can just ask questions of them and say, hey, like, who can draw our forecheck? Or where do we stand on the penalty kill? Have them go move the magnets around. The other one that's been, and you guys probably can't see this because it's backwards, but I have this like check mark system I do with teams. And I did this with my junior team forever, where we would set specific goals for each game based on what we worked on in practice. And I thought to myself, I'm going to do this with the U9 kids and just see what happens. So we had a tournament here and we had 4 games, 2 games each day. There's no championship in U9. You just play 4 games and get a medal. That doesn't mean anything. And I've never seen these kids so focused. I mean, it works in junior because the girls are like, okay, we have a focus and we can win something if we get a lot of check marks, right? So if they got enough check marks, they won cupcakes, like good cupcakes, not like the cheap grocery ones, good cupcakes. And they were so focused. They knew what we were working on. They were things that were realistic. So the check marks on this were 12 or more shots on net, 3 or less offsides. This was a tournament right after we taught them offside. And then 3 defensive hunts. So where you like chase someone down and steal the puck in our own end. And then they lost a point there if they gave up a breakaway. And we got every single check mark. And these girls were so fired up about it. And so we do it, we didn't do it for a month. And then the girls were like, hey, can we do check marks again? And we did it in a game on the weekend. And all of a sudden we had our best game of the season. And so little things like that make a big difference. And I'm new to this age group in terms of coaching a team. I've taught skills at this age group forever, but the things that I'm doing with them, I'm not the head coach of the team. I'm spending as much time as I can on it, but like to Peter's point, I'm running around coaching a bunch of different teams and I don't have an hour and a half before practice to do this stuff. And then the only other thing which I would recommend, like we put this together, it's a coaching book for all our teams. So it's got like game cards and it's got the check mark thing I just showed you. So every coach in our organization has that. But then I think I showed this before, Wally. It's got our mission, vision, and values for the organization on it. It's got somewhere for them to put that for themselves. It's got our whole Wildcat way to play that I created. And so and then it's got practice reminders like don't shoot too many pucks at the goalie's head. That's actually not in there, but it's probably a good one to have. But again, this took a lot of time to create, but I can go into a rink and I know every coach has this and I can ask them to show it to me and I can say, what's on your game card or what check marks are you doing? And there's, that sets a certain amount of accountability. It's culture, right? But it is also X's and O's. It's also tracking, okay, the last time we played Mississauga, what was the game like? Oh, here it is in my book. It's meeting people where they are and not expecting them to be full-time hockey people. So those are just 3 little things that I grabbed off my desk there that I would suggest, make a big difference for all the levels. And again, we have an expectation from our U22 junior team all the way down to our U9B team and everywhere in between, all our 32 rep teams. They don't all have the magnetic board, but I certainly expect that they have, they're doing not the minimum. I don't like the word the minimum, but they're doing the minimum effective dose or the maximum effective thing in the minimal amount of time to get the best result possible. And that's how I've changed my coach development. Like, Rick, I just sent you the email I sent out yesterday. You can go down quite a rabbit hole on that email of all the videos I sent about goal scoring. Most coaches can't read through all of that or aren't going to. If you send them one image about where to shoot in the net, short side low or whatever it is, they're going to be able to absorb that. So that's always, and I think the players are the same way, right? 5 minutes here and there. I had a coach mentor years ago who told me he used to 5 minutes before they did the team meeting for the game, he had one coach take the forwards and one coach take the D for 5 minutes. And they could talk about anything, right? But if you think about it, that's 5 minutes before every game all season that's specific to your position. Like, that's gold, right? Because or else you're doing a 2-hour D specific session. The Ds are like lost after 10 minutes. So anyways, just a few tricks of the trade. But yeah, I can send the game if you guys want. I'll put the PDF for this in the chat. It's not just game cards, but I can share all of it with you if you want. I'll throw it up here in the attachments.
Kim, I just typed in what you've said is everybody has to discover the right amount, the right time, and the right way of doing things. We've got a wealth of knowledge, but sometimes we overload. Coaches often talk about what they know, and it isn't appropriate for the audience they're working with. And I think what Al has discovered, and you are rediscovering, is the effectiveness of the way to do things efficiently to get a result. I just love the way it's going, Al. And before we get back to you, Al, I want Hal Turst to introduce himself. Hal's in Minnesota, and you can tell by the color of his hair, he's like you and I. And he'll introduce himself, and then I might have a leading question, if nobody else does, for Al to get going on this adventure of what I call doing things the right way. Go ahead, Al.
Hello. Pleased to meet you, Hal. You're Hal, are you?
Right, Hal. Yeah. Nice to meet you.
We have a boy at Shattuck there. He's a prospect and a boy from Newfoundland, and so we have a lot of kids that go in those directions. And it's so pleased to meet you. I just wanted to comment on one thing, Kim. I have a magnetic board with Montreal and Toronto as the little men that move around on it, and that is the best teaching tool, and it probably taught more than anything that I've ever had. And kids can, as you're saying, the kids can draw out the situations and everything, and ask them, well, is somebody else got another idea? And that for the elite kids, and they learn from it. They love it. You can't buy them anymore. I think, Tom, don't you have one with the magnetic men on it?
I think he's still driving.
Okay. All right. So anyway, that's the one. And Kim, your other ideas, I'd like to have copies of those things if you don't mind, because this is you guys are the teachers, and there's so much experience right here that and the good thing about it is none of us know it all. So, we all know a little bit, and by sharing it, it can become really good. The other thing I do that's different maybe is I don't use an X and O board on the ice. I talk to them, and I want them to paint word pictures in their mind, and so they pay attention better, and most of them get it, and there's always one kid that'll get it first, and then there's some that don't learn that way, so they go at the end of the line, and the kids help them. They have to go to 5 or 6 stations, and it's all movement. They're all moved together, and those kinds of things in our drills. So I've had more success not using a board, because sometimes they tune you out, because they see that in school a lot, and when they're more alert when they're painting word pictures in their minds.
Al, I'm just going to ask Hal to introduce himself now, and then we'll get back to you. And I've got a couple questions in mind. So, Helters?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think I just finished my 51st year of coaching.
Wow.
Bantam Bees. Some of the folks on the call know that we've had I would like to call the first half of the season the worst half of season we've ever had, mostly off ice issues and some on ice. And the last month has been awesome. And since we last met last week, we've played 5 games. 4 of them went into overtime. 1 was double overtime. We lost last night 4-3 in overtime. And again, we're playing against programs. We have 300 kids in our program, and we're playing against teams where they have 1,000 kids in their programs. And we beat one of them the other night in overtime. We lost last night to one of the other ones. But I have actually never seen a team go from really poor to really good in the course of a season. And I standing on the bench last night watching them, execute everything we've been working on all season long, and it finally clicked about 3 weeks ago. And I was just awed. And the coaches from the other teams were awed. And I don't know, it's process, right? You got to believe in the process, and you got to do the right things and let the kids, you got to inspire them to believe that they are way better than they are, and they will go out and execute. So, this is super. Kim stuff. Where'd she go? Did she leave? Oh, she turned her camera off. Kim has got some really, really great stuff, and I'm going to now move in probably into a player development, which is really a coach development role in our organization. And I'm going to steal everything I can from the rest of you guys on this call. So, and I have some ideas of my own. So, okay, on we go, Wally.
Okay, Al. Al, have you got anything in particular that you want to stick handle with now? I've got eons of questions. The one thing, and I'll just bit of a promotional thing. Al, you told me a story last night about Nathan McKinnon being one of your demonstrator.
Well,
Go ahead.
I'm not sure he was a demonstrator. Sydney was a demonstrator, because Sydney spent 8 summers with us from the time he was about 5 or 6 till he was 14, and he'd come for a number of different weeks in the summer. He'd stay on site. Then we were at the old military base, and that was the time during when Cassie was with us, and Brad Richards and all those guys, and Nathan always came for his skating, and his father said, that's what he liked most about it, and he was always a little small. I don't remember if he was a demonstrator or not, so he was always a great person. His father was wonderful, and came in after he was through with us. He came in one day just to revisit the place, and he's respectful and nice, and so was Nathan, very quiet, but he spent a number of years working on his skating, and that last presentation, Hal, is that sometimes what you're teaching comes to fruition later on, and obviously you taught them well when they're starting to have success now. There's a period, there's a plateau in between there when they're absorbing all that stuff, and then all of a sudden it breaks forth, and you think, wow, finally, finally. And, so thank you so much for that.